Hello Gemini, and welcome to your December 2021 reading. This is a general reading, so take what resonates and leave the rest. If you're looking for a more well-rounded perspective, go ahead and check out your sun, moon, and rising sign to kind of put it all together. All right, let's go ahead and begin. The first card we're starting out with, we have Puna's Wild Daughter. There's a bit of a connection with wild side. Definitely the concept or the word wild is really kind of resonating with this particular card. And the aspect of how she's just shining as a result of tapping into this aspect of self. We have this other image here where this person is kind of in a seated fetal position. And this light, bright being is sort of hovering over and even pushing that aspect down. And I do feel like this is kind of representing the two aspects of yourself. And, but I feel like the representation here is that there's a part of yourself that makes you feel light, and there's a part of yourself that when you are kind of entertaining that aspect, it makes you feel just heavy emotion, and you're being told to allow the light aspect to sort of compress that. I hope that makes sense. So it's just that act of participating in things that allow the wild and free, the bright, light, and warm sides of ourselves to be what resonates the most. And as a result of that, it just naturally will start to compress that darkness. It's not necessarily an act of avoidance. Obviously, when you're experiencing specific situations of certain sorts of emotions and trauma and trying times, you should be addressing those. But one of the ways to address those is to be finding that inner light that shines brighter, and that becomes the dominant aspect of yourself versus the other. So overall, I feel like, and I do feel like this is also representing that you're coming out of an experience that was dark and heavy, and kind of made you feel like you needed to sort of protect yourself, kind of curl in a ball to protect yourself for survival. And you are coming out of that and allowing your lighter half to shine through. You've reached a point where you can allow that light half come up and rise to the surface and shine. And ultimately, as part of the process too, it's not just an act of compressing as much as you can see, there's a light coming off of this image fingers and glowing into this being's back. And it just feels like it's representing the aspect of healing. So when we allow this lighter half of ourselves to shine brighter and extend into more of the dominant factors of who we are emotionally and spiritually, it heals that dark. It doesn't just compress that darker side of self. It's not just negating that darker side of self. If you're doing it thoughtfully, it's actually even healing that darker side of self, and hopefully can lead to growth that will allow us to become whole. And the wholeness will be more of a bright aspect than the dark aspect. We're following that with 8 of Wands. I feel like this is work related. Like right away, the word that came to mind was work related. So there are things that you are working on that you've been sort of waiting for. And this is just a full out message that the movement that you have been anticipating and you have been sort of feeding and nurturing, and may have even kind of played a part in that self-preservation mode that you had been in prior to this. That action you've been waiting for, the things are going to start being put into motion in it feels kind of around the second week of December, like the beginning of the second week of December. So somewhere around this, like early days of the month of December, the movement's going to start. It's not going to be full on. So it's not going to be sudden in the sense that you're going to go from 0 to 60 or 0 to 200, but it's going to be enough that you're going to see it. You're going to notice that, oh yes, that's the shift I was waiting for. That's the movement I was waiting for. That's the action I have been anticipating. So you will notice it, at least beginning, and then be able to watch and even participate in the movement. If it's something that you have to participate in, you'll be able to participate, but definitely that energy is going to be present at the beginning of the month. This is followed with the Six of Chalice, and I feel like once the Eight of Wands beginning movement begins, I feel like there's just an overall sense of being able to relax a little bit, being able to enjoy things, being able to, instead of being in the headspace of solving problems and always being an adult and approaching everything from the mentality or perspective of an adult, you can kind of tap into being a little bit more at ease, a little bit more relaxed, just kind of letting go enough that you don't feel like you have to have your adult hat on. You don't have to have that problem solving sense always in the forefront. And I feel like that's kind of even tapping in a little bit with that wild aspect that I mentioned at the beginning, kind of tapping into that wild side and that free aspect. So I feel like once you notice the movement, there's definitely a connection with that carefree. Like I said, I really do feel like the best example or the best explanation I can give is kind of recognizing that you don't have to wake up in the morning and put on your adult problem solving hat that's going to squeeze your head all day long. So just kind of tapping into the carefreeness that happens when you don't have constant responsibility demanding you solve everything all the time, solving all the problems all the time. That's the energy that I'm getting from that Six of Chalice. This is, like I said, this is going to kind of come into play after that Eight of Wands, that movement begins. It's just going to make you feel like you can relax a little bit. We're following this with the King of Athames, and I feel like this is coming in strong with the idea that you'll finally be able to be in a position where you can breathe and think better, problem solve. It's just kind of ironic that once the movement happens, you feel that kind of reprieve to be able to not feel like you have to problem solve and are obligated to solve all the things all the times. You'll be able to kind of be a bit more childlike in your approach and your relaxed view of the world. And at that time, when all of that comes into play, you're following that with the energy of King of Athames, which is basically saying, I feel like you're going to be able to problem solve now. Like suddenly, all of the stress factors that were in part or in play prior to this experience, once those stress factors aren't pushing on you, demanding you hurry up, or you no longer feel like you have a demand to hurry up and solve all the problems, it's almost like all of the ability to solve problems is just going to come easier. And you're going to suddenly feel like you don't even understand why you were struggling so much prior to that, because without even thinking about it, you're going to be able to come to some sort of conclusion. And it really does factor or tie in very heavily with when you're not under that sort of compression all the time, the stress factor, and are able to breathe a little bit better. It's just going to create an environment where you're just going to be able to really allow yourself to relax in the decision making. It's not going to feel so heavy, essentially. But ultimately, the King of Athames, I feel, that represents that as you move towards the end of the month of December, you're just going to feel in such a better, solid place. And even though the decisions are no less important, they're not going to feel as heavy. You're just going to feel like you have the wisdom and the understanding, and the solutions are just going to feel like they just come to you. They flow to you fairly quickly and fairly easily. We're ending the month with heart healing. I feel like through this all of this, there's been some emotional connections that as a result of self-preservation and just dealing with the things that you have been dealing, there's been some heart connections that you have been either dismissing or negating, or maybe even kind of taken for granted, and therefore possibly taking out your frustration on. So they've been kind of that it feels like there's specific people. So it's one of those things where what comes to mind is how sometimes when we are the most stressed, the people that we take it out on the most are the ones who we know we can rely and trust will take it from us. We know that they're still going to have our back no matter what we say or do, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to you. So I feel like the pressure that you've been experiencing has kind of allowed you to take for granted some heart connections that you have, and maybe not be as true in the relationship as you typically have been prior to this personal experience. So as you end the month of December, I feel like there's going to be some just reflection on these heart connections, your place and point of reference throughout all of them, their place and point of reference through all of them, the situation and experiences, and just kind of come to a better term on a personal level. And I don't know that it's necessarily something that you have to go and seek apology for or anything like that. I mean, obviously, if the circumstance requires, then by all means, if it's a connection that you want to maintain and heal, then please do. But if it's never been something that you actually acted upon, but it's definitely something that has happened low-key on some sort of vibrational level, I feel like there's going to be a healing that's going to happen towards the end of the month. And however that looks and however that unfolds, it's a person-to-person thing, but however that applies, allow it to apply to you. All right, Geminis, that's all I have for you for the month of December. I hope this reading has been everything you were hoping for and more. Be sure to check out your sun, moon, and rising for a more well-rounded perspective, and hopefully I will see you in a future video.